people. And I call those whose water was born in the north. There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my soul, and it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my soul. And I call those whose water was born in the east. There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my soul, and it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my soul. And I call those whose water was born in the south. There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my soul, and it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my soul. And I call those whose water was born in the west. There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my soul, and it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my soul. I call those whose water was born from the center. This is water that was nourished this community of people, including the Seminole people who lived on the shores of the Manatee River for millennia, to the people who live here today. It is water that nourishes us today with the diversity of experiences, through the cracks and the crannies of the barriers we have faced in our lives to bring us here together in this place. There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my soul, and it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my soul. I have the microphone. You have the microphone over here? Is this on, or do I have to do something to it? Okay, got it. Okay. So I'd like to invite you to come forward as you're able and pour a sampling of water into the vase in the center here. Announce where your water was born, where you were born. Mine was born in Port Jervis, New York. Your water from your birthplace has flowed to join with the waters from many different locations. Together, we create an ocean. Just like that. So come forward as you're able. I'll just say it.
Salem, Ohio.
Bowling Green, Ohio.
Long Island, New York.
Macungie, Pennsylvania.
Allentown, Pennsylvania.
Plainfield, New Jersey.
Belper, England.
Baltimore, Maryland.
Long Beach, California.
Erie, Pennsylvania.
Guilford, Connecticut.
Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
The Badger State.
Englewood, New Jersey.
Budapest, Hungary.
Hannibal, Wisconsin.
Buffalo, New York.
Lakeland, Florida.
There are some of us.
Detroit, Michigan.
Buffalo, New York. And I want to say for Charles, Bald Hill, Oklahoma.
Geneva, New York, and I was born on Seneca Lake, which has underground springs.
Ah. Well, right here, just right here. That's good.
All right. Newark, New Jersey.
Brooklyn, New York.
We'll move that one out of the way.
Chicago, Illinois.
Penryn, Pennsylvania. Penryn, Pennsylvania.
Garfield, New Jersey.
For the whole thing.
Caruthersville, Missouri.
Rockford, Illinois. Watseka, Illinois.
Washington, D.C.
Washington, D.C.
Let's make it 3, Washington, D.C.
Oddly enough, Braden, Florida.
Good.
I was born in St. Louis, Missouri, and grew up in Michigan.
Evanston, Illinois.
New York City, New York.
Miami, Florida.
Neptune, New Jersey.
I was born in Nashua, New Hampshire, and raised in Hollis, New Hampshire.
Marshall, Missouri.
This is for Ricky. She was born in Brooklyn. And Chuck Wolf, he was born in Cumberland, Maryland.
I already announced myself.
Oh, you did.
Brighton, England.
Potosi, Missouri. Potosi, Missouri.
Why don't we sing that last chorus again? There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my soul. And it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my soul. It was a hot summer day just outside of Nogales, Arizona. We were entering the desert to drop off gallons of water for the migrants who were crossing the desert to find a better life. The place where we parked our vehicles had a good-sized lake nearby. Our guide said that the water in that lake was poisoned by runoff from a mine. While it looked enticing, it would be deadly if anyone, human or animal, drank from it, as it was full of arsenic. We walked into the desert. Other than the brittle brush and few scraggly trees, there was little area for shade. We continued walking, climbing over barbed wire towards the trail that the migrants walked in the middle of the night when it was cooler. There were outcroppings of steep rocks with sudden drops. We found abandoned shoes and blankets. In one rocky cliff, there was what looked like a small cave of about a foot deep. There were rosaries and prayer cards left by migrants on their journey. We found old opened bottles of water that we dumped because we feared contamination. So many migrants developed dysentery and other waterborne diseases, so dumping the water was a life-saving precaution. We collected these bottles to take back with us. In its place, we left new bottles of water. We dated them to alert how long the bottles were there, and we wrote messages of hope, prayers, via con Dios. This was a mission of mercy, humanitarian aid to people who would die in the desert without water, as thousands do every year. Our government is now criminalizing humanitarian aid offered to people in crisis along the border. Being a Samaritan and offering aid is an act that all people of faith are compelled to do as part of embodying their religious convictions. Being denied offering this aid is a direct affront against this nation's declaration of religious freedom. Having water to sustain life is a right. Clean water is necessary for life on this planet. 70% of the earth is covered in water, but only 2.5% is fresh water, and only 1% of that is accessible. Much of that 1% is trapped in glaciers and snowfields. That small percentage of fresh water that is not trapped provides life for every living thing on this planet, including 7.7 billion people. When I was a child, one of the favorite places I enjoyed going to was hiking up to Dripping Rocks. It was located deep in the woods of my grandparents' property. Dripping Rocks was an old slate quarry. My grandparents had no idea as to when that slate quarry was in use, as it was always called Dripping Rocks, even when they were kids. In time, the slate cliff became the exit to the surface of an underground spring that flowed through the crevices of the rocks and then down the rock face, covered with a thick moss that was perpetually dripping water to a small pool beneath. I remember drinking this water off the moss. It was the sweetest, most refreshing water I have ever tasted. The last time I was there, the water table had changed, and the rock face was no longer moss-covered, and water no longer dripped there. Chalk it up to climate change, or more likely, housing development wells into the groundwater. The sweet-tasting water will most likely recede as a wonderful child memory to be recalled in my old age. Maybe it already has. Sadly, we are not good conservers of water. We plant crops that have a high demand of water in arid lands, such as almonds, pistachios, rice, alfalfa. Alfalfa grown in California to feed cows in California uses up 2.7 trillion gallons of water a year. Water that is not readily available in California, so it is pumped in from the Colorado River, a river that for 16 years never reached the Gulf of California. This is costly and, in my mind, nonsensical to grow water-hungry plants at such a large scale in a desert clime. Yet, here we are. We use rivers and ponds as our dumping grounds of waste. I lived for a time in Danbury, Connecticut, that famed hat city of the world. We could tell you the color of the hat being produced by the color of the still river that day. And while the hat factories are now gone and the still river runs clear, there is still high mercury content in the sediment of that river. In Alabama, coal ash leaches into the Black Warrior River, which provides the drinking water for Birmingham and Tuscaloosa. This leaching was all but stopped by the EPA regulations, and wildlife in the region was beginning to flourish again. The water quality increased. Fish thrived in the river. The rollback in regulations has already had disastrous impact. Streams are once again carrying a petrol film. In June of this year, Tyson Foods dumped wastewater into the Black Warrior River and caused a massive 175,000 fish kill in the river. A second fish kill occurred in August. I remember the photos from the late 1960s of Lake Erie burning. A lake that should have been teeming with life was on fire like a funeral pyre. The water was a thick chemical sludge. That fire and fires of other rivers and lakes brought about the Clean Water Act of 1972 and the Safe Drinking Water Act of 1974. The Clean Water Act regulated businesses that would dump their waste into the watersheds and rivers. The Safe Drinking Act sought to ensure that water used for human consumption was free of contaminants. Both were very successful, but close to 50 years later, there are cracks in the implementation. National Geographic reported this past March, across the country, water systems are old, badly maintained, and in dire need of modernizing, from lead service lines in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and Newark, New Jersey, to silt and debris in drinking water after heavy rain in Austin, Texas, to fecal contamination in Penn Township, Pennsylvania. Worse, some are managed by dysfunctional agencies where incompetence and socioeconomic and racial bias determine whether a community is made sick by its drinking water. The reality is that we can no longer assume that our water is safe to drink. While we were bemoaning the crisis in Flint, Michigan, a crisis that continues, the people in Dallas County, Alabama, one of the poorest counties in the country, were facing contaminants in their drinking water due to in part to a lack of infrastructure in their sewage disposal. This county was declared by the United Nations to be in worse living condition than many underdeveloped third world nations. The richest country in the world, and people living in poverty that rivals the poorest of countries. And one evidence of that poverty was the lack of access to clean water. Upgrading our water system's infrastructure is a top priority. Puerto Rico is a prime example of how not upgrading water systems failed American citizens when Hurricane Maria whipped through the island territory. It was already in bad shape prior to the storm. Natural Resources Defense Council reported in 2015 that Puerto Rico received water from systems that violated the Safe Drinking Water Act. They were old and in need of repair. When the hurricane hit, those systems failed, and now even today, residents are still being asked to boil their water. As climate change progresses, we can expect more Category 5 hurricanes destroying our aging water systems. The time to upgrade them is now, and not wait until the next catastrophic event to occur. This was the lesson from Katrina when New Orleans water system plant and sewage treatment plant were flooded, forcing citizens to be without water for weeks afterwards. The aged systems were already degrading the water purity. Katrina brought the need into stark reality and caused suffering that could have been prevented. You see how well we learn from catastrophic events. During my childhood, the water my house received was from a well that was only 13 feet deep. There were several summers when that well would go dry. My father would go over to my grandparents' pond and bring back large garbage bins of water that we used for bathing and flushing. We would take our glass milk bottles, remember those? And have them filled up at relatives for drinking water. Laundry would also be done at relatives. Today, there are some 1.8 billion people who are facing a water crisis, in part because their wells are drying up. The World Health Organization predicts by 2025, half of the world's population will be in a water-stressed region. Water is the sustainer of life. Yet we have treated it as if it is unimportant, something to pour down the drain, something to wash away our waste and pollutants. We think it will always be available to us to abuse. And while water might remain as a constant amount on this planet, it is not always going to be potable for us if we do not treat it with the respect it deserves. We have received warnings throughout the 20th century, the effects of polluted water, deformed frogs and fish and poisoned rivers and streams with our toxins so our grass is green. Concentrated cancer demographics near wastewater ponds. The warnings continue to mount up. We are not honoring the life-giving water by holding it sacred. Water is the sustainer of life. We have a relationship with water. May we acknowledge that fact and how we use it in our daily lives. Please join me in singing hymn 163, For the Earth Forever Turning.
We've done this once before, to my knowledge. Note in this one the repeated notes. A lot of repeated notes, a lot of scale-wise. I'm going to play unison through your part as an introduction, and then I will start at the beginning, at the four-measure introduction, and play the as written.
Okay. Please rise and bow to your spirit. For the earth forever turning, for the skies for every sea, for our lives, for all we cherish, sing we our joyful song of peace. For the mountains, hills, and pastures in their silent majesty, for the stars, for all the heavens, sing we our joyful song of peace. For the sun, for rain, and creation sing we our joyful praise to thee. For the world we raise our voices, for the home that gives us birth. In our joy we sing, returning home to our blue green hills of earth. Please be seated. We come to a time in our service where we lift up our prayers of the community. We'd like to lift up Ann Rogers, who is in physical rehab after suffering a fall. Again, best wishes to Barbara Jensen on celebrating her birthday. Gratitude for opportunities to gather for a shared meal and fellowship, such as Friday night at our Share a Dish evening. And gratitude for wonderfully rich conversation at the first session of our Transgender Inclusion in Congregations course. Continued thoughts for the restoration of health and wellness for Daryl Bartz and Joan Butcher. There are many who aren't able to be with us and might enjoy a note in the mail, a phone call, a visit. If you notice someone who is not here today, please make a point to reach out to them this week. Let them know we are thinking of them and that we care about them. There are many in our community that are going through transitions in their life, some publicly known and some held privately, but nevertheless profound. We do not always know the transitions that are occurring underneath the surface, away from the noise and busyness of daily living. And so in our thoughts and prayers and our meditations, seek to be gentle with one another. Offer a listening ear rather than unsolicited advice. A hug instead of a judging glance. There may be a day when we are facing our own transitioning health or grief of a loved one or personal pain that sears the heart, and we will want the supportive ear of loving kindness done. Let us hold these joys and sorrows and those that have not yet found expression in our hearts in a time of silence. May our hearts be inspired to offer support to one another. Amen. I'd like to invite, we have a special collection this morning for Downtown Ministries. I'd like to invite Christine Moore Loomis to come forward and tell us a little bit about Downtown Ministries. I noticed, I just want to also shout out that this morning they had posted on their Facebook page some of the work that they're doing for the Bahamas. They're sending a whole bunch of needed stuff out there. So they're doing good work. And so please, Christine, come forward and share with us a little bit more about your work.
He's emphasizing the 5 minutes. I'm a talker, but I will definitely keep it to 5 minutes. We just want to thank you. My husband and I want to thank you for inviting us here. These past 2 weeks have just been wonderful, getting a chance to talk with you all, visit with you, and just getting to know you a little bit. It's just been a blessing for us, so thank you so much. 6.5 years ago, my husband and I were called to walk away from what most people would consider a normal life. Our jobs, our careers, our benefits, our retirement plans, all those nice safety nets that we all have here, and just walk away from and kind of turn our backs to what most people would consider a normal life. And we formed an organization called Downtown Ministries. That organization supports the homeless and the marginally housed living in downtown Bradenton. These are people that are predominantly forgotten by society. They're people that have been discarded for a variety of reasons. Their families have abandoned them. Their children, their parents have forgotten them. Society pretty much turns their back on them. But these are the people that we were called to reach out to. Our ministry is boots on the ground. We're dirty in the trenches. We don't have glamorous buildings to work out of or any of those things. We are right out on the streets with the people we serve each and every day. We do fill physical needs for the people we serve. We provide meals and food and clothing and hygiene items and bicycles and so many more things that physically they need, the basic human things that people need. We'll get people a pair of boots to get back to work, a bike to get to work. We'll get clothing for their children so they can go to school like every other child. We fill the needs for food and all those other things, but in a so much greater capacity than even filling the physical needs of the people we serve. Much more important to us is being in a relationship with them, to every day be there for them, to give them compassion, to give them love. So many of the people we serve, they have no idea what it is to get a kind word anymore. Most people turn their head when they see them. They walk away from them instead of toward them. Our ministry every day, we're known for our hugs, big hugs, hundreds of hugs going out every day to people, that physical contact to let people know that they are loved and cared for. We spend countless hours in hospital rooms, bedside, emergency rooms, ICUs, sitting with people that deserve to have someone sitting with you, just like you and I do, so they're not alone. We cry with the people that we serve. We laugh with the people we serve. We go through the hardships of loss with them. During the heroin epidemic, we were losing somebody every single day. These were somebody's mom and dad, somebody's brother and sister were dying every single day during the heroin epidemic, but we stood with them side by side, courageously just trying to lift them up every day so that they could move forward. It's so important that we remember who they are as individuals and as people. Our ministry is committed to them. As difficult as some days are, we continue just to go out day in and day out. And as the homeless will often describe our ministry, these people just keep coming. They just keep coming. They never give up on us. They're there each and every day. So we thank you guys for giving us this opportunity, for being willing to support the work that we do. Before I close, I'm just going to share a quick story from yesterday, which I think just kind of encompasses what we do each and every day. We were serving breakfast to 200 men, women, and children yesterday, and a new lady stepped up to get breakfast. Her name was Tiffany, and she arrived from South Carolina just 4 days ago, and she's staying in the Salvation Army. And she said she came out here, and she said it was the most amazing thing she'd ever seen, that while sleeping in the Salvation Army, she was called to say, hey, there's work I can do in this community. And here is somebody who has nothing, but the first thing that's on her mind is, how can I help somehow? So she came up to one of my volunteers, and she put something in her hand, and when my volunteer opened it up, it was a crumpled up $1 bill. And she said to our volunteer, this is everything that I have, but I'm giving it to you today. So we just want to thank you for your time, and just keep thinking of us and keep praying for us. Thank you.
Perfect. Perfect. It is now our time for our offering. And I forgot to print those words out here, so I'm going to ad-lib. And plus, you know what the offering is, right? So every Sunday, we collect an offering from our hearts to support the work of our ministries. And we ask that you do so with joy and with gratitude. And today's offering is being shared with our friends at Downtown Ministries. So I ask you to be generous, whether that's through a check made out to them or in cash to the offering plate. We will now, the ushers will now come around with a plate, and your offering is gratefully received. Our closing hymn is Blue Boat Home, 1064 in our teal hymn book. Please rise in body or spirit.
Okay, what we have here.
No. And we've also
Is-
sung this before.
Is a well-known hymn tune, but we have some changes in rhythm to fit our words, and also the accompaniment is unusual, which really makes it one of the most difficult congregational hymns I've ever run across. But what I'm going to do is I want you to notice that in between stanzas and at the introduction, you've got 8 measures. 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 8 measures of that in between the stanzas. And on the first 2 stanzas, I'll actually play in the left hand your part, and on the last time, I'll play it as written.
We're good.
So, I have trouble finding the switch. There. So 8 measures, and then.
Though below me I feel no motion, ocean, standing on these mountains and plains, far away from the rolling ocean. Still my dry land heart can say, I've been sailing all my life now. Never harbor or port have I known. Wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home. Sun, my sail, and moon, my rudder, as I ply the starry sea, leaning over the edge in wonder, casting questions into the deep, drifting here with my ship's companions, all we kindred pilgrim souls, making our way by the lights of the heavens in a beautiful blue boat home. I give thanks to the waves upholding me. Hail the great winds urging me on, greeting the infinite sea before me. Sing the sky my sailor song. I was born upon the fathoms, never harbor or port have I known. Wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home. Please be seated. I call Doris to come forward for the extinguishing of the chalice. Doris, the extinguishing of the chalice. Please join me in reading our words in the order of service. We extinguish the flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Go out into this world. Be grateful for the water that we have. Honor it. Savor it. And work so that others will have clean water too. It is vital to our life and our existence. Go in peace.